What I am concerned about is the Washington war machine doing what
you say that's Lindsey Graham.
I take that as Senator Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina. I take that as the military-industrial complex. I take that as a guy that is going back to my home state of South Carolina, telling mothers and fathers to send their children into war to take an island over oil. And I am vehemently opposed to that.
I want to play, so everyone's on the same page, hearing what you're talking about in reference to Senator Lindsey Graham, what he had to say. Let me play that.
So here's what I tell President Trump. Keep it up for a few more weeks. Take Carg Island, where all of the resources they have to produce oil. Control that island. Let this regime die on a vine. We got 2 Marine expeditionary units sailing to this island. We did Iwo Jima. We can do this.
Something significant just shifted in Washington. A Republican Congresswoman, Nancy Mace, someone who built her career on loyalty to Trump, put something extraordinary in writing, an official congressional letter stating that Attorney General Bondi mishandled the Epstein files and actually worked against the president's own interests.
New tonight, the Justice Department said that Pam Bondi won't testify in the Jeffrey Epstein probe since she's no longer serving as Attorney General. Bondi was scheduled to appear for a deposition on April 14th before the House Oversight Committee to discuss her handling of the Epstein files. The DOJ says that since Bondi was subpoenaed in her official role as then Attorney General, the subpoena no longer applies. It's now asking that the subpoena be withdrawn. A spokesperson for the Republican-led House panel says it will contact Bondi about next steps.
Here's why that matters so much. When a Democrat criticizes this administration, Republicans call it partisan. But when a sworn MAGA ally puts those same criticisms into a permanent official record, the entire defense collapses. It stops being an attack and becomes a bipartisan conclusion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee issue a subpoena to the Honorable Pamela Jo Bondi to appear before the committee for a deposition regarding the department's handling of the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and his associates and compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
A motion has been made. The committee will hold this motion in abeyance until the end of today's hearing. The committee will now proceed with today's hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee issue a subpoena to the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights for the awards and settlements paid pursuant to Section 415 of the Congressional Accountability Act prior to December 12, 2018, with only redactions allowable for the personally identifiable information of victims, alleged victims, and witnesses. Thank you, ma'am.
The House Oversight Committee then escalated dramatically. They issued a formal subpoena requiring Bondi to appear for a deposition. Not a casual interview, not voluntary. A legally binding order with a hard deadline and real consequences for anyone who ignores it. The DOJ responded by claiming she no longer serves as AG and therefore won't show up.
Former Attorney General Pam Bondi was supposed to appear before the House Oversight Committee next week, but the Justice Department now says she will not. The department argues that because Bondi was subpoenaed in her official capacity as Attorney General, the subpoena no longer applies. President Trump fired Bondi last week. Lawmakers on both sides say they still expect her to sit for the deposition. Republican Nancy Mace says Bondi cannot escape accountability by leaving office. Democrat Robert Garcia says he will push for contempt charges if she refuses to appear. The fight centers on Bondi's role in releasing the so-called Epstein files, which lawmakers say contained multiple errors and missed a release deadline set by Congress. The committee is also pressing ahead with other witnesses. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates is set for a closed-door interview on June 10th. Gates has denied any knowledge of Epstein's crimes and says he's willing to cooperate. He has called his meetings and dealings with Epstein a huge mistake.
The committee fired back with a legal argument that stopped the White House cold. The subpoena, they said, binds her personally, not her former title, meaning you cannot simply resign your way out of congressional accountability. The obligation follows the individual, not the office they once held.
Now, a committee spokesperson, Congresswoman, had told CNN just last night that the chairman, the plan after the news was that the chairman was going to speak with members about the status of the deposition subpoena and confer on next steps. Have you talked to the chairman yet about those next steps?
I have not yet, but I made my point very clear yesterday when I issued the subpoena that was voted on by the Oversight Committee a number of weeks ago. We did it by name and not by the title of the Attorney General. So she's still compelled and required by law to come before the Oversight Committee. And
Let's be clear about why this moment is genuinely different from every other controversy surrounding this administration. Several things are happening simultaneously, and each one alone would be significant. Together, they form something much harder to escape. First, the subpoena targets Bondi personally, not the Department of Justice as an institution. Her, as a private individual who made specific decisions about specific files that produce specific outcomes. She cannot claim executive privilege the same way. She cannot argue that testifying would disrupt ongoing departmental operations because she no longer runs the department. Every legal shield that former officials typically hide behind has been stripped away. Second, the contempt threat carries bipartisan support, and real bipartisanship is extraordinarily rare in this Congress. Republicans and Democrats are standing together, saying the same thing: comply or face legal consequences. That unity removes the partisan escape hatch that has protected this administration through every previous investigation. Third, and perhaps most damaging of all, the Republican defection is now part of the permanent record. Nancy Mace's letter lives in the official congressional archive. It cannot be deleted, denied, or reframed. Every future journalist, every future investigator, every future campaign opponent can point to it and say, even Republicans acknowledge this. That single letter transforms every Democratic criticism into something that no longer requires Democratic credibility to land. Fourth, the subject matter itself, the Epstein files, guarantees sustained public attention in a way that abstract policy debates simply cannot. People across the political spectrum share a deep, visceral reaction to the idea that powerful individuals may have received protection while victims received exposure. That reaction doesn't fade. It compounds with every new development, every new hearing, every new detail that emerges under oath. Now consider what Bondi's deposition actually means when it eventually happens. Every answer she gives becomes part of an official record. Every evasion creates a documented pattern. Every contradiction with prior statements becomes potential perjury exposure. The questions themselves will be straightforward and devastating. Who decided which Epstein files to release and which to withhold? What criteria were applied? Were any communications exchanged with the White House during that process? Did anyone outside the Department of Justice influence those decisions? There are no clean answers to those questions. Every response either confirms the concerns already raised or creates new inconsistencies that demand further investigation. And throughout all of it, Mace's letter sits in the record like a fixed point, reminding everyone that a member of Trump's own party formally concluded that Bondi handled things terribly and undermined the president himself. Trump's public response, defending Bondi on social media while attacking members of his own party, reveals more than any poll could. When a president feels compelled to defend a fired official against critics from his own conference, that is not a strategic move. That is damage control that has already arrived too late. The contradiction alone is politically corrosive. Trump called Bondi's congressional performance fantastic. Mace called it a failure that undermined him. Both statements are now in the permanent record. Both cannot be true. And the fact that a Republican drew that conclusion publicly signals that many more are drawing it privately. What this moment ultimately represents is something American politics rarely produces cleanly. Institutional accountability functioning exactly as it was designed to function. Documentary evidence that overwhelms spin. Congressional authority asserting itself regardless of executive resistance. And a partisan firewall that finally cracked, not from outside pressure, but from within. Those 11 words in Mace's letter handled the Epstein files terribly and undermined President Trump, will be cited in future hearings, future filings, and future histories of this period. The president can respond on social media. He can attack the narrative. But the document itself remains unchanged, undeniable, and permanent. And in accountability, the documentary record always outlasts the spin.